Welcome to part 2 of this drag and drop tutorial. The first part was a client-side version of this where you've got a stimulus controller that's moving to-dos along the list. The next bit is actually having that synchronize with the server so that when I refresh the page, those to-dos are in the correct order. So follow along as we kind of work on the data modeling side of this. Now, I've got the same code as before. I've got the drag and drop. I can take this, I can move it. It looks pretty great. But as you notice, I move this, changes on the website, but I refresh it, it's gone. Let's fix that. Now, first off, I've got the to-dos. They're very simple. It's just, is it completed and its name. And I need something to kind of order it. So I'm going to name it priority because we kind of assume like, well, if it's the front thing, it's the most needy. Doesn't necessarily have to be like that. So let's go and make a migration to add this. But look at this, add a column to the to-dos, priority, integer. We can migrate this. That's there. Now, I've already got a couple existing to-dos here, and I don't want to have to like delete them and reorder them because that's kind of, if you've got an existing application, you don't want to just go delete data. So let's kind of fill in the beginning bit of that. And what I think we'll do is for this case, we'll assume that every priority starts off as the ID. It's a simple assumption, but it'll work in this situation. So we can go to our console. So now I see that my to-do with an ID of 1 has a priority of 1. That's great. Now we can go to the to-dos controller on the Ruby side, and we can just order this by priority. And nothing should change here because these are all kind of in the same order. Next, I need to actually set that priority when the to-do is created. So let's, after we've gotten the ID from the database, save that. Okay, and that's just a way to have those priorities set as we're moving them. So as you add new to-dos, they kind of get put in the right spot. Now the next bit is, what are we going to communicate to the server? And so one way I've seen this done, and this is what's worked well for me, is to actually add another controller that we can call the priorities controller. And this kind of works along with the to-dos and lets us sort of shift things around in the right order and kind of move that reordering logic away from the sort of basic to-dos logic. So add a controller. And let's go to the routes file. So we've got resources, to-dos. We'll make a nested route. And it's only going to have an update action. So we'll update to-do with the priority. Add our update method right here. So we'll get into the logic here once we kind of have it actually sending something. We've kind of stubbed this out now where we can get send the response to the server. So let's go to the stimulus side and start wiring that up. So first we want to get the right path for the to-do. So we got the reorderable ID, data, reorderable path. And because this will be different for every to-do. So the first to-do would be to-dos /1/priority. And then what we'll do is we'll post the ID of the item that we dropped, of what was dropped onto. And then we'll let the controller on the Rails side be responsible for sort of figuring out how to shift things around, just so we can keep that business logic in one place. So there's kind of two bits. There's the actual change of the UI, which we done in the DOM. And then we send that change from this ID should go in this place. And then we do the logic and just in one place on the server. And then we don't really have to do anything else because it's sort of updated on the front end and it's on the back end. And it's all synchronized that way. Now let's go to the stimulus side. And we had our drop. And that's where we move things around. And now we want to just make a request to the server and tell it that things changed. And so we know the drop target, and so we can get that reorderable ID, and the dragged item, we get that reorderable ID, reorderable path, actually. This would just be kind of a vanilla Rails action right here, form data that will send in a fetch request. This is one of the parameters. The value, again, of the drop target. We call fetch to the dragged items URL. So let's get that off the dragged item. We will pass in a bunch of options for that. So the first one is going to be the body, and that's that form data object we created. We want to set the method. We want to include the credentials, and this is like the session ID so that it gets authenticated if we're using that. And then we need to include that CSRF token. So let's put this here. We actually need to get this from somewhere on the page. And so that's pretty straightforward. I've got another tutorial, where do you store your data in Hotwire, that kind of shows you the technique for this. But at the very end, the very least, it's just a function we can tack on. Let's take that function, move it here. And what we're looking for is the CSRF token. And just to show you, every Rails page has this. It's here in the head element. CSRF token, so that's this content right here. And this is just a secure thing to help our website get protected from cross-site scripting attacks. And then finally, since we're doing Turbo, one of the things I found is, especially with the morphing, is we actually want to make this a manual redirect. And this just makes sure that everything kind of fits right. So this will send this all out, and that's kind of all there is to it. So I got my console here. Let's drag this. And you saw that we sent something. We had an error. What was that? Undefined. Typo, reorderable path. And we got patch to-dos 1 priority. To the priorities update, the reorderable target ID was 3, the to-do ID was 1. Okay, so that's the bit. And again, nothing changes on the page. Now it's our responsibility on the server side to actually put this into the database so that we can, this is saved. And when you refresh it or you open it on another browser, that change is actually there. So let's go to the priorities controller here and let's start working on this. The first bit is we want to find the first to do. So again, this to do here is the one we started dragging, and this is the one we dropped it onto. And what we're going to end up doing is making this to-do's priority, this to-do's priority, the new to-do's, and then having to do a database operation to kind of shift a bunch of the priorities. So we want to just be a little defensive and make sure that this actually exists. So if it is not nil, let's keep track of that priority. So old priority, and then new priority for the to-do. And so there's kind of two different paths in terms of like how we're shifting these things. So that generically it's sort of if the old priority is greater than the new priority, we're going to want to, so that means that old priority is maybe 4, new priority is 1. So we want to, old priority now becomes 1, and then everything 1 down has to kind of, 1 between 1 and 4 has to shift down. So old priority was 4, new priority is 1. That means that the to-do, that old priority becomes the 1, and then everything else shifts down 1. So the new priority to-do's priority go from 1 to 2, and then the one behind that would go from 2 to 3, and then the one behind that would go from 3 to 4. So there's kind of a couple steps here that, to figure out which is the right order to shift those things. And so the reverse of this would be if the new priority is greater than the old priority, and sort of the same idea, but a little bit in reverse. Now, obviously, if it's the same priority, That means it's the same to do, and we don't actually, that's a no operation. There's nothing to do there. The first bit I want to do is actually have a way to pull all those to-dos, because we're going to have to end up changing all those priorities. Let's make a private method. So we'll take a range. So we'll take a range object. Just use active record to find all the things. We want to make sure it's ordered in the right priority so that we can shift them around. So here we can go to-dos list. So again, if this was 1 and this was 4, this would be from 1 to 4, and it's inclusive. It's going to include all those. And then we need to iterate through all these items. Oops. But we're actually going to end up not doing the last one, because the last one is our new to-do, and so that's an operation at the end. But for all the other ones, we have to shift them down. So again, this is just an index of the arrayed item in there. So first to-do gets to-dos list at I. And this is kind of your basic CS 101 swap between a couple items. So first to-do priority. Just like that. So we've swapped them all in place. The to-do at the end of that list, to-dos list, is that to-do that's getting updated. Set the priority of that to the new priority. This is where we will do an upsert to get all these. So we'll do that in a second. So let's do the second bit where the new priority is greater than the old priority. So that's again, like the old list was 1 and we were moving it to 4. That's where we'd be in this situation. It's a little bit of a different logic to get it all working, but it's kind of the same idea. We need to pull all the to-dos in that range. So we can copy this one here. Reverse the order. So from old priority to new priority. And then we need to do the same kind of iteration, but we have to do it in the opposite direction. And so this one took me a while to figure this one out, but it's the length -1. So we're going to start at the end and kind of do that same shift, but in the opposite direction. And would you know, Ruby has the method for us down to 1. So if there's 4 items in the list, we're going to go from length -1, which would be 3, index 3, down to index 1. And that's going to mean that we're not touching index 0, but that's fine because we'll touch that at the end. Each do. So again, iterating through that. Similar logic as before, but just in the different order. So first to do gets to-do list. At I -1. Second to-do gets to-do list at I. Now we've got the same swap. And then the same thing here, to-do list, because this is the original one, but instead of at the end of it, it's going to be at index 0. Just like that. Okay, so now I've got the list in the correct order. And what we need to do is do some kind of upsert for all this. So let's say, make a method, both of these do update to-dos, and we'll pass in the to-dos list. Take in that list. Now, we're using Postgres here, SQLite. They both have this upsert method, which is really great for sort of adding a bunch of things at once. And the one challenge with it, though, is it doesn't take the active record items. It actually has to take a hash of all the items. We have to do a little bit more manipulation of this to-do list, but that's not a problem. Just name it to-do details. Actually, So the list to do details, yeah, that's fine. And what we can do is just, again, a couple map functions. So the ID, that's the details. So it'll be an array of all these items with these keys, which is then what the database is going to use to put those all in there. And then we go to do dot up assert all to do details. So that's one database operation. Clear this. Make our switch. So we'd expect 1 to go to 4. Patches in there. We see the request and we get an error. Undefined out. Okay, so come here. So 1 to 4. Drag it. So you can see the database operation here. Put all those things in that correct order. Now, refresh the page and they're in the right order. Look at that. So one single database operation. Obviously, we had a second database operation pull those to-dos in there. Load in those other ones, a couple there, but you know, if you had like 100 of these, that would just be one single insert. So that's pretty cool. So now we've got very interactive drag and drop, and it is actually saving that on the server, all with just a little bit of Stimulus and a little bit of Ruby. So hope this was enjoyable. I hope you saw like how you can add interactivity, but then also do some really cool database operations in order to not send too much data into your database at once. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave them and I'll be happy to respond. You can find this tutorial on my website, onrails.blog, and I'll have a link to it in the show notes. Have a great day.